So I see that we're streaming, Mrs. Coster.
Yep, it's still, there we go. Okay, we're set.
May I have a motion to reconvene the public meeting at 7:53 PM?
Make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And we stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hopefully everybody had a good break, enjoyed the holidays, and wish everybody a happy and healthy new year. Hopefully 2021 will bring us a brighter future than 2020 brought most of us, and we can look towards the future and put the past behind us. Does any board members have any board announcements at this time? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to Dr. Pritchett for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Happy New Year, everyone. On our agenda tonight, I just want to make a quick adjustment. We do not have a PTA president's report. We hadn't met because of the holidays. So I will look forward to providing you with an update at our next meeting. On our agenda, we have two, I'm going to say, pretty substantial presentations this evening. The first is the capital master plan. We're joined here tonight by our architect as well as our construction manager. We also have our mid-year data presentation, and I see that Dr. Kulat and Ms. Corcoran are here again. So it's a pretty good size. These are both pretty substantial, and I think great presentations we're going to be hearing tonight. Before we get into that, I just want to do a point of recognition for some folks who did some incredibly important work prior to us going on vacation. The FEC plus our community partners, as well as you all as volunteers with regard to our food pantry. And I just want to recognize a couple of folks who I think did an incredible job of providing some substantial community building to our community. And I'm going to say our A team, if you will certainly permit me to call them the A team, although everybody was, did an amazing job, and nobody was any more important than the rest. But in terms of volunteers who helped coordinate and spearhead the initiative of the food pantry, those folks who helped distribute and stock shelves from our community, I'd like to recognize them this evening, are Evan Parchevsky, Anne Marie Ewell, Mr. Dan LaMadrid, Mr. Lonnie Jacobs, Mr. Mitchell Jacobs, and Mr. Russell Jacobs. I'd also like to recognize our student ambassadors, Isabella LaMadrid, Matt Tobin, Olivia Steiger. Olivia actually developed an app for the inventory. We also had a number of staff members who did an incredible job of ensuring that this was a success, and it was. We have Pat Kelly, Lillian Croyle, Jackie Garrett, Cleo Girandola, Joe Lloyd, AJ Walker, Bobby Wong, Lisa Jacobs, and Karen McNee. And I would also like to give a special thanks to our ESO team, our ESO members who came out just prior to the holiday gathering to do a food drive. Special thanks to Heidi Hill, Bill Hughes, Marissa Primus, and all of our ESO members for organizing a wonderful display of support for our families and food pantry team. And there was also our students provided holiday music, and a parade of donations allowed us to restock our shelves for the new year and remind us that together we can, and to do what we need to do to help each other out. And I think that that's a critical point to make right now. last night I was watching some of the discussions that were being had on the Senate floor as it related to this most recent election. And I know that they had been struggling through a particularly challenging day yesterday. And I was certainly inspired and encouraged by some of the words that I heard being said last night. There was a senator from Nebraska who basically said, America isn't necessarily Washington, D.C., or even the Capitol. It's really, America are the neighborhoods, are the communities that we live in. And now I think is a very important time for us to show each other how much we care about each other, regardless of our differences as they relate to, some challenging, political conversations we've had over the past few years, to put those aside and demonstrate, to show how much we care about each other. And I think that really, if nothing else, although I know there's an amazing amount of work that the food pantry folks did, but I think really at the core of that was sort of this culture of caring that we've shown, that we've risen to, and that we've been able to unify ourselves during particularly challenging times. I want to, if you, and one more thing before we get into it. I have a friend. My friend's name is Herbie. Herbie and I went to college together. You know him as H.R. McMaster. He was the national security advisor in the most recent administration. He's a 4-star general, and he's done some amazing work in terms of public service. And he said something this morning that I thought was very inspiring to me, and I'd like to share it with you. And Herbie and I went to college together, and we spent some time in the Army together. So he and I are lifelong friends, and I'm certain he would appreciate knowing that his words were being shared here tonight with you folks, because I know he respects the work that we do as well. And what HR said was, quote, "It is time to educate ourselves about the gifts our republic bestows, recognize our republic requires continuous nurturing, bolster our democratic institutions and processes, which you as a school board are critical towards, and reject any of those negative things that are designed to polarize us or pit us against each other, because truthfully, we care about each other, and we need to make every opportunity to show that we do care about each other. So thank you for doing that. Thank you to the folks who live in our community. Thank you for the folks who committed to the food pantry. And what I would like to do is possibly, when we're all back in person, if we could bring those folks in and do a special recognition ceremony, just to make sure that we show them our appreciation for all they've done for the folks in this community that have been struggling or who may be food insecure, and just need a little bit of extra help and love and attention to get them through these challenging times. It means the world to those folks, and I'm certainly proud to be your colleague, and I'll look forward to recognizing you in person under better times, when we're able to. So that concludes that recognition of our FEC. Thank you for that. What I'd like to do next is, if it's possible, I know we're being joined here by, we've had some ongoing conversations about capital project work and the work that's happening in the summer. We've exchanged some emails. We had a meeting last prior to going on break to help refine some of the scope. I know the board has had some questions, concerns that they would like to maybe have a conversation about as it relates to putting this work together and making sure that we have a successful project for the summer, and that we're able to do that work. So, Mrs. Koster, I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to you at this point. So maybe you can introduce the next piece of the superintendent's report, and you can open it up to board questions as it relates to the work.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Pritchard. So joining us this evening, as Dr. Pritchard mentioned, is Lou Rodriguez, our construction manager from the Palumbo Group. as well as Lauren Tarcio from Clark Patterson Lee, who has been our architect on our capital project work. Both have been, as you know, involved in our master planning efforts. And as Dr. Pritchard mentioned, a meeting before winter break involved ideas for potential scopes of work for summer of 2021 timeframe. And it was approximately about 9 different types of scope of work, primarily consisting, just as an overview, electric work of varying sorts across all 4 buildings, as well as improvements to our integrated communication systems that consist primarily of clocks and PA systems and some of our safety lockdown features at our secondary level, and looking at some change outs of some existing water fountains and renovation of a elementary toilet room. And given the timeline, you know, SED, as we know, was on a much shortened window than I think we've ever seen, I think almost in my entire career, but they are starting to inch back up. So we had provided a timeline, and I'd like to have Lauren and both Lou just kind of go over the potential timeline, which I have to say, I kind of consider worst case scenario, because the last thing we want to do is overpromise and underdeliver, especially, you know, seeing how we get to SED for review of projects and sort of their time it takes to review, and what potential questions they may have. So what I'd like to do is have both Lou and Lauren kind of go over the potential schedule and their thoughts and considerations that went into that, but also some insight as to the work that they do, one, to prepare the submittal for approval, but what happens during the review process, and what are those key aspects of the working coordination that goes from submittal until the start of work. And with that, if Lauren and Lou, if I can turn it over to you to give your thoughts, and then if the board has questions for Lauren and Lou, we can open it up then, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I believe at the last meeting, Alicia did share with you a phased approach to the scope of work that she just listed out. These would be on 2 separate schedules. The first phase being the Schaefer bathrooms, work at Schaefer regarding bottle fill stations, branch panel work, and then at CLE, replacing the main distribution panel and adding some electrical branch panels. So that's what we would be calling phase 1 of this project. It's somewhat straightforward work, and we are committed to being able to complete the design of that work in 4 weeks. SED approval actually just creeped up again this week. They are now at 10 to 12 weeks for their review time, and I think the original schedule Alicia shared with you showed an 8 to 10 week. So if we were to submit plans the first week of February, which would be the plan, that means the SED review would not come due until, or at least be approved until roughly the middle of May. Then we would need a couple of weeks to bid it. So at that point, we would be talking about end of May bid, maybe the first week of April for a bid. And then at least a week to vet the contractors, qualify them, make sure they understand the bid, make sure the numbers make sense. And then, a week basically to do that, and then write a recommendation letter. So that would be sometime in the end of May. That's where we land. First week of June, last week of May. So that's a very aggressive schedule, and that's only for a portion of the work. Then we have a second portion that is the work that's associated with the higher level, Tappan Zee High School, South Orangetown Middle School. At the middle school, we're looking at a service replacement, transformer replacement, and switchgear. And at the high school, it's branch panel replacement and adding some panels. It's all related to the electrical capacity. So with that phase, we would be proposing a little bit more time. And the reason being is we do have to get the utility involved. on the transformer work happening at Soames. So that is at a minimum a 2-month process. So unfortunately, we were not able to squeeze the work at Soames in this summer, but fortunately, the transformer work is an exterior type project for the most part. So a lot of that work could be done during the school year, on off hours. So, we saw some opportunity there to be able to still get the work done, at least in the fall or potentially winter. So with that submission, we'd be looking at submitting in mid-April. Approval would come in July, end of July. And then we would suggest waiting until the fall to bid the project. And the reason being is a lot of the contractors find themselves to be pretty busy if we're coming out of SED in July. July and August, that's their prime time of construction. So we want to give them time to be able to look at the documents. So bidding in the fall, early fall, and then awarding in October would be the plan for that phase of work. So does anyone have any questions on that schedule that I just laid out?
Lauren, if I can ask,
Absolutely.
your SCD timeline, the creep that you just mentioned, is there real risk that those dates can even, that timeline could actually extend even further, even as we get it in, beginning of February, and we find out that that timeline actually stretched even further, would be my concern.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's always risk of that. On the flip side, it could reduce. So it's hard to say what SED is going to be doing. As far as I know, they're all back in the office. They're working full time. They're not remote anymore. So it should, in theory, should go down. But yeah, you're right. We're seeing it go up. We can't predict one way or the other, but there is that risk.
So should we be building in, recognizing it could go the other way as well, but should any timeline that we're working on build in 2 weeks extra or whatever, just to, not be surprised in the event there's a delay?
Yep, we can absolutely do that. That's just going to push everything further into the summer. And at that point, it almost makes sense to push everything to the fall.
I mean, my concern would be obviously is, and you and Lou would have a better perspective, right? How many districts have been waiting to see what the new year, brings in the outlook, and could there be an uptick in projects for, planning for this summer, and all of a sudden there's a bubble of work that gets brought to SED, and we make all these great plans and we get boxed out. I wouldn't say that wouldn't stop us from doing it, but I would just obviously just make sure we're setting right expectations.
Yeah, that's definitely valid. I think Lou could probably speak to what his experience is. I think his firm is working with many districts in the area. So
yeah, I think what's good about the scope of work that we're talking about, it's really focused more around electrical. The electrical contractors, there's a lot of contracts that contractors deal with prison work. They've been put on hold. I've been getting calls from a lot of electrical contractors that would love to have some work coming into the new year. Generally speaking, when you look at 2021, big contractors usually at the end of 2020 have had a major hook, a major project coming in, and that's really what carries them through the year. A lot of contractors don't have that. So I think that if we're able to get this thing up to SED, get it approved, we're going to be able to get some good bids, primarily because there's so many things that are still sitting on the shelf. And Dan, you're right. I think timing is important because we don't know, right? Right now I know we just took in bids a week ago on a significant project. We had 76 bidders. So we were on, on 5 primes, we were significantly deep on all of the primes, and we've never done that. It was pretty crazy. Next Thursday, we're taking bids in on another significant project. We're already 6 or 7 deep on every prime. They're already there. Now, for this electrical work, we want to get out on the street as quick as we can, right? What I've done in the past, I've put out to bid, and every district is a little different. I've put stuff out to bid prior to SED approval, just to get it out on the street. It's a creative thing of, so you're not approving or you're not awarding a contract. You can bid what you want. You can't award it because you're looking for SED approval for aid, right? So what I've done in the past is maybe there's a mix, maybe there's a play. If we know that this is an easy SED approval on this stuff, maybe we get out on the street on the back end of SED approval. SED approves it, we're taking in bids, and they're sort of happening in parallel. And then any SED changes or addenda, we put those things out via addenda. I've done that, but everything's got to sort of sync. And I think for us, for this summer project, we have to think outside the box as much as we can to try to make everything work. But you're going to get a lot of bidders. There's definitely not as much work, and there's still a lot of hesitancy out there and in the bidding market. The second quarter, I think it'll get better once everyone feels more comfortable. A new person in charge at the White House. The first quarter is not going to be that way. Second quarter, we may get a little better, but right now, I'm already seeing it. There's still a lot of projects shelved. This is primarily electrical work, and there's a lot of electrical contractors looking to bid. So I know we can get the bidders. With the understanding that we will push into the fall. You can't. So the other qual on this is if you're doing major front end work, switchgear work. A lot of the manufacturing companies are not, it's no longer off the shelf. They are manufacturing to produce. They're not sitting there holding it because they can't. So lead times are longer. If we award at the end of May, there has to be an understanding that we're going to be scrambling to do some work at the end of August, and it will push into September, October for some work. There's got to be that understanding. There's just by virtue of the timeline that we're looking at.
What's the lead time on switchgear now?
Right now, 8 to 10 weeks on a, you're talking anywhere from an 800 amp to a 1200 amp service.
That's
Which in the past, I could get that switchgear in 4 to 6. Now it's 8. It's significant. So it's.
But that's 8 to 10 weeks after approval.
That's right.
So what you're really talking about is you're not even going to have the switchgear until sometime in September.
Potentially.
And how do we start major
Well,
electrical work
Well, so
during school?
Lonnie's bringing up a good point. What we've done in the past too, it's some districts will buy product, and in the contract it is for the contractor to install. So you guys buy the product, it's ready, so we can sort of source it now, and it's owner to provide, contractor to install. The only issue with that is that we're still waiting. So we're waiting for SED approval. we're waiting for a good bid. You're not going to just buy product to buy product. You want to buy the product when you know we're within budget and we're able to do the work. But what we've done is bypassed the submittal and approval process. You're buying equipment for the contractor to install. So if we're looking for a way to really expedite, that would be a way that we could get around the switchgear side, which I already feel is going to be, an extended timeline. You guys can, CPL could give you the spec. We buy it, we source it, we buy it, and we provide it to the contractor for install.
But we don't get state aid on it because we bought it.
What's that?
But we wouldn't get state aid on it because we bought it.
I don't know about that. In the past, we've gotten aid on that. If it's part of the project, if you buy it, you should still get, if it's part of the project, you should still get aid on it. I mean,
If we
Yeah,
buy it-
that's right.
That is correct. Yep. We do receive aid because it's still a part of the approved project.
Even if we buy it before SED approves it?
Yeah.
well,
we do
no,
receive
I'm not saying that. I'm saying we source it, we don't pull the trigger until after SED. Yeah. But at least we're not going through this middle process. Yeah.
Right? I mean, you're only saving a couple weeks for the approval, there's the submittal approval process at that point.
Yeah. I'm looking, I'm throwing out options.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So it sounds like there's a lot of variables out there, and there's a lot of, and a lot of tightness with the schedule. I mean, I was concerned when I saw when I heard the end of May bid time, but I like what you said, Lou, about, maybe doing some things in parallel. So if we do not, if we are not able to meet the summer of 2021, are there any plans, or are there any contingency plans and any fixes that might be needed? I mean, we're talking about a lot of electrical work. I'd hate for us to have some electrical issues once school starts again in September. So what is that backup plan?
So, and that's a great question. I think, what's tough right now is that I don't have a set of plans. This is big picture. Once I have a set of plans, my job is to do a full estimate on the scope, point out the potential hurdles that we're going to run into. I don't have that. Right now, we're talking big picture. We've been talking about panel replacement. Once I have a design in front of me, I can really come up with a great, a really great plan to move forward. I don't have that right now. And this is how it works, right? We're looking for the okay to move ahead. CPL will give me a set of documents that I can, right now there's a budget. I think the budget is it's a big picture. I want to be able to put together an estimate based on a scope and come back to you guys and say, I feel comfortable that we're going to hit that number. I haven't been able to I can't do that yet until I have a set of documents. So there's a lot, you're right. There's a lot going on. And, again, this happens, we're ready to do it. It's all electrical work. So I say a lot of it is electrical work. Low voltage side, you already have numbers from Open Systems on the PA system, on the PA side. So that's pretty straightforward. It's really the sub panel, the switchgear side, sub panel, new transformer, that kind of thing that I want to do an estimate for. And I don't have a set of plans to do that yet. So I want to do that. I can phase it. We've done panel replacements, working second shift. The one thing I don't know right now is, are we replacing just the panel, or do we have to replace the wire as well? I don't know that. So that's where I'm, once I see the design, I'll be able to give you a better idea. I know we can do it, but yeah.
And the other aspect of workload I believe we have a good number on is because we've done previous of the gang toilet rooms at Schaefer.
Yep.
And the one that would be recommended being done is similar to the one that we did 2 summers ago.
Yep.
So we have an existing design and existing numbers of actual expense on that work that we can fairly quickly turn that around as part of the first submittal. So Lou or Lauren, do you see any issues with being able to do water fountain work in addition to what Lou just mentioned, the Schaefer bathrooms and all of that as part of the first phase?
Well, the only thing I would say, I don't see an issue with the water fountain work. That's pretty minimally invasive, but the bathroom work, that's the one scope of work out of all of this that we really do want to strive to hit the summer months with. That would have to shut down the bathrooms for a number of months. And if you recall, a couple of years ago when we did, well, actually, I think it was only last summer, when we did the bathrooms across from the library at Schaefer, you know, those bathrooms were closed all summer, and we used the entire summer to do that. So with that said, that's the one scope of work that I would advise if we needed to hit the summer to do, that would be the one.
So I have 2 other questions. I mean, it's the beginning of January. Is there anything that can be done at the architectural engineering side to expedite the design drawings? That's my first question. The second question is, I recall when we had SED submission in the past, there was a concern about queue, like getting in the queue. And if you had, you know, if you can give SED a heads up, you know, that you can get, like as soon as you're ready to submit the drawings, that you won't have to be in the back of the line. So is there any of those type of approaches that's also incorporated into the timeline?
So all we need is an approval to move forward, and we are really ready to hit the ground running. So, you know, we're going to do everything we can. You know, we looked at this in every which way to be able to get this done in 4 weeks, and we've committed to doing that. As far as SED and the queue, in the past, it was common practice for architects to submit plans that weren't finished just to get in line. SED became wise to our tricks, and they now have a process where they do a pre-review. So they're gonna do a cursory look at the documents to make sure that they are complete before they will even put it in line. So unfortunately, there really isn't much of a way to get around waiting in that line anymore. But you know, it's really up to us to just put the nose to the grindstone and get the documents done. And as Alicia mentioned, we have already done you know, a very similar set of bathrooms. So that's really a no-brainer for us. There's a little bit more work involved as far as some of the electrical work, but you know, we really did look at this, and we're confident we can get that done in 4 weeks.
The other thing, Alicia, I just want to make sure the board understands. I really do believe this is a great time to bid. I believe there's a lot of value to be had. With that being said, there's got to be some flexibility on schedule. But I really do believe we can get some great pricing on work. We just have to, you know, is it all going to get done during the summer? I'll say absolutely not. It's going to push into the fall. But the value, I really do believe there's going to be a lot of value out there right now. The bidding climate is right, and your district should take advantage of that. You really should.
And Lou,
on this
to add to that, you know, and I don't know if everybody had an opportunity to watch the governor's address yesterday. Given the outcome of the Senate and all of that, he's basically rewriting his State of the State address, which is on Monday, and it turned to a much more positive, you know, hint that maybe may not see the type of reductions that we were expecting in terms of what would be funded in aid next year. And I don't know if that's going to trigger districts or others that may have been kind of holding pattern, waiting to see how the new year opened, to give more confidence to start to submit more projects as the months go on. So I would just, offer that we keep that in mind, that our political world is changing, and it looks like the governor is going to take a very new approach in his address on Monday, and definitely hinted that we may not see some of the reductions that we've all been planning and anticipating for next year's budget. And just to add to the schedule in terms of our expense and just our long-range financial picture, really in terms of the memo as part of the schedule, being able to close out I'll call it the first phase and the second phase, that would allow us, as long as we're within those windows, to be able to submit the project to the state and then start our aid clock when we need to start receiving that aid. And our expense will hit in the fiscal years that we needed to hit on, which would basically be the 2021-22 school year. And then the aid flows would be first phase, we would generate at least a full year in the following year. And the second phase, as long as it's submitted before June 30th of 2022, we would receive the first half of the aid payment in the following year. So that the schedule in this scenario here, as Lauren and Lou have outlined, it still fits within the financial parameters that we needed to fit in terms of receipt of aid and then the accounting for the expense. So I think I just wanted to put that out there too, that it doesn't jeopardize where we need our finances to land in next year's fiscal year.
So let me ask a question, and it's more towards Lauren, and quite honestly, I don't know if you can answer it, but if I was going to do the switch gear, right, I would think that I would basically gut the existing room and make room for the new switchgear so that I had an efficient layout of the new switchgear. If we're doing it the way we're talking about doing it, will it compromise the way the switchgear will be installed and basically not utilize the space properly and look like it's I'll say a rushed installation?
What we've done in the past is we've left the switchgear, the existing switchgear, in place until the last minute. So we would schedule a switchover usually on a weekend, or it takes at least a day. So it usually would be on a weekend if it wasn't over the summer. And I think we actually did this at Schaefer, where we would take the existing switchgear out and then put the new in. So it's really not a huge undertaking. The new switchgear takes the place of the old switchgear. I mean, at Schaefer, we ended up relocating it, so it wasn't so much of a one-for-one replacement, but in CLE, that's what we would be doing. I think the same thing at Soames, but again, we haven't started the design, so we're not really sure, what the logistics of that would be, but I know for sure the intent at CLE is to do the one-for-one. So the new would replace the old in the same location. So it's really not a reconfiguring of the electrical room or anything.
Which is good. I mean, that's what I really want to hear, that, you're still under this, provision that you can pull out the old and put in the new with a limited shutdown window, that, if we did it over a school break or something like that, it's a doable process.
Yeah, that's what we would propose.
But at the end of the day, the work we're really going to do this summer is very minor.
Well, yeah, the bathroom work is not so minor, but as far as the panel work, that's just a lot of taking ceilings down, running conduit and wiring down the hallways. The panels themselves are usually tucked into janitor's closets and storage rooms. So there's not a lot of disruption other than ceilings coming down in the corridor. So that would be the type of work that we'd want to get done in the summer. If we were in a situation where we'd have to do that on second shift, so after school, we would have to write into the provisions of the documents that the contractors would come in, They would remove the ceiling for as much as they needed for that night and put it back before the staff comes in the morning. So we would have to write that all in, of course. And this is kind of fluid. So we're giving you our best scenario right now, and that's barely hitting the summer. And if that changes, if SED timelines change and we're put into a different situation, you know, that's where Lou will come in, and he's going to take a look at the logistics of everything and make his recommendation as to how to go about that. And then we'll tailor the documents to accommodate that.
Okay, so let me ask the next question that I have with regard to the OGS contract. So we talk about the PA system and the clockwork and some of this other work being on OGS contracts, right? But you know, the clock is the clock and the wiring is the wiring. So how does this lay out and be utilized that it's on the OGS contract? Because I just have difficulty comprehending how the OGS contract can be a lump sum number for our building when they have no clue what our building layout would be.
You want me to take that? So I can start, and then Lauren and Laura, if you can join in. So a lot of the New York State OGS contracts as it prepares for this, and there's also a lot of the technology contracts based on the equipment that's covered under the contract. It's more of, I'll say New York State through their purchasing department will let a competitive bid out and qualify a number of vendors that fit under those categories and equipment that can be covered under that bid. But it also still requires like a mini quote system under the bid where the company will come out, multiple companies can come out, get an idea of what our specs are, what we're looking to do, our building layout, and then they have to submit a quote that is still compliant under the existing bid. So they have to stay within ranges for cost of the equipment, cost of installation. Of course, we always have to pay prevailing wage, whether we let the bid or New York State did. And the vendor they're qualified just as if we were doing our own bid. Did they meet all the specifications? Did they submit, are they qualified? Or, you know, they met all the non-conclusive requirements. Everything that we would put out, it's just that New York State has done that competitive bid for local government and school districts to access that part of the bid, but it still would require us to have those awarded vendors that fit under this communication systems part of the contract to come out and go through our buildings and follow what our specs are and submit a mini quote. So they would have to give us a price on what the cost of all of the components of equipment are, what the cost of the wiring would be, what the cost of installation would be. And a lot of times New York State OGS can be, because they're sort of like our parent when it comes for school districts, when it comes to bidding. Definitely, I would say in my prior experiences has been a lot more, I want to say restrictive in terms and sometimes can be a little bit more detailed in the qualifications they expect. But again, you know, it's one avenue. It's an option right now to say, let's at least look at that. It doesn't mean that as part of the approvals and with Lauren and Lou looking at our competitive bidding schedule, you know, it doesn't mean we can't bid it as part of that schedule and then make comparisons between the two and take the most cost-effective approach that meets our needs and meets our expectations. So right now it's an option. And I mention it only because when we were looking at our smart bonds money and we began in a team with Jack Rallo and Lauren and seeing, you know, what the needs of PAs and clocks, what our needs were that we could leverage a safety project under smart bonds. So we began some of this research about a year and a half ago. So we have kind of a good working knowledge in terms of what the building needs are and what some of these companies are. But they still would have to come out. They would still have to tour the building. They would still have to submit a quote or proposal. It just sometimes expedites it for school districts that we're not letting out a competitive bid to solicit potential vendors to do this work. New York State has already sought out those vendors that now can come in and give us an actual price under the OGS contract for this service. So it may be more cost effective, but it also may save some time as well.
So
And we
you,
can still include it in with our other bids if we wanted to do that as well.
so you wind up getting multiple quotes still from the OGS contractors.
Yeah, yeah. And we could include still, depending on what Lauren and Lou's thoughts are and approval, we could still include this work as part of our other competitive bidding and see which one comes out better for us.
Yeah, I like the idea, depending on timing of SED approval, of putting it out as an ad alternate on the electrical contract.
Mhm.
And what that does, it keeps the guys true, right? I think we can get pricing prior to SED approval on a scope of work. And you're right, Alicia, these guys can get running on low voltage, second shift. They can start running low voltage to the classrooms,
Mhm.
but we can keep them honest on a bid day, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, just getting that all on that scope of work, and make sure that what we have allocated is right. And their scope of work is going to change. I think the initial scope of work talked about classrooms and offices. So do we want to pare back? That has to be discussed too. We have every single room being addressed on the PA side and the clock side. So, yep.
My understanding, though, if we go in the OGS route, is potentially not getting state aid. Did I understand that correctly?
No, that's not true. It's still, as long as it's submitted as part of the overall project, it's an expense for equipment under that project. All we're doing is saying, instead of SOCSD letting a competitive bid for integrated communication systems, we've chosen to use this awarded bid from New York State. It's a resource to use instead of our own bid. But Christine, as long as we submit it as part of the package to the state and it's approved as part of the overall project, and we expend those monies properly under that project, that would be submitted as part of our final cost report for aid purposes.
But then I think I heard that mid-May, so say the first phase we're talking about, mid-May, we'd get the, and what was it, end of May, we get the bids, and then 2 weeks later, we get the bids back. If we go the OGS route, how much time are we saving? Because I thought I heard they would still have to give us a mini quote anyway. Did I understand it incorrectly?
Yeah, and we've done some preliminary work to see what originally what costs would be. So we could refresh that. We may save a few weeks on that, from going through a bidding process to award to then with our bid, remember on the project, then doing submittals and part of the contracts if it was on the electrical contract. So it may save us a few weeks. Lou, is that correct? Potentially?
Yeah, so you can have an OGS price on the side waiting until SED approval. We can take bids in. OGS, those guys would be ready to go. Their submittal and approval process would be pretty quick. So we can get separate pricing on bid day. We'll see what the OGS guys, if their number is a good number, we're ready to go. If it's not a good number, then we have to talk about it. And we've done that before. And it's a way to keep these guys true to form as far as their number. A lot of these guys want to say that they feel like they have it, it's their game. We can hold it to bid day. And then if we let them know we're bidding it, they'll give us a better number. And I've done that with equipment contracts. You can go off of the state contract for, owner supplied HVAC equipment. I've done that as well. I've held the equipment number, and then on bid day, I do an ad alternate for equipment to be provided by the contractor to make sure that contract number is an aggressive number. And if it is, then we move. And even if it's a little higher, if it's a small percentage higher, we still move because we know we can get the equipment there right away. If we can save 2 or 3 weeks, that's big money during the summer. So.
So then, do I understand it correctly? Is there a scenario then if we go multiple parallel pathing? I think what I'm hearing is though, but if we go with the electrical, the work that we were planning for the summer of 2021, and we go the OGS route, could we save 3 weeks? Could we get the work done over the summer?
Yes, there's definitely the reason to go the OGS route. You're going to save time. Yep.
Even with the lead time of the panels being 8 to 10
Well, no,
weeks?
the OGS that's
8 to
low
10 weeks?
voltage. This is clocks and PA.
Oh, so the only clocks and PAs we're looking at the
That's
OGS
right.
route?
The OGS is
Okay.
just clocks and PA. It's not
Okay.
high voltage.
It's not that,
all-
it's not that
it's all-
phase one, okay.
It's all low
Gotcha.
voltage stuff. Yep.
And there's no concern about lead time for the clocks and PAs?
Clocks and PA. If we're talking to them now, we can get. They'll be ready to go. That's they're pretty much they're pretty good about getting that. It's running the low voltage. We can get that going right away. Running it to all the classrooms. You guys have a lot of different. You got the call switches. You got the speakers. You got a lot. Back. There's a lot going on in each room. So we just have to figure out what you guys want to buy. But yeah, we can get that done. It's all low voltage runs. It's the same thing that we do with fire alarm systems. We run that second shift. We run the low voltage, get it ready for the summer. If we're doing a new fire alarm system, it's the same kind of thing. New, yeah.
And again, we would still get the state aid? Okay.
You got to make sure it's approved by SED. Yes. Yep.
I guess this question is to Alicia. How did we get to this point? Lonnie and I attended every facilities meeting, and we stressed from the beginning of the school year that we couldn't miss the opportunity to do work in the summer. And what I'm hearing now is we're not getting a lot of work done during the summer.
I understand, Tom. I think part of it was still going through the master planning. And to be honest with you, if there was considerations of a potentially larger project, the thought process on how we group scopes of work may have looked differently than what we're proposing now for summer work. What I would also offer is that, we do a lot of district projects during the summer as well as part of our maintenance. And then with the bathrooms, the clock PAs, possibly some of the initial panel work at the elementary schools, it's still, I wouldn't say it's a large amount of work, but I would call it maybe medium level of work. But we also have additional work that we do every summer outside of capital work to make sure our buildings are maintained and updated. And I know Mr. Rallo has been working on his list of those maintenance things that he wants to get done in the buildings over this summer.
I don't think that you can honestly say that we're making the best use of our time this summer. And Lonnie and I, at almost every meeting, emphasize the need to concentrate on summer work. Lonnie mentioned many times, work the project plan and work backwards. I mentioned that on at least one occasion that if you ordered materials, you were going to be delayed. And here we are.
And I
it's a lost opportunity.
Yeah. And I think what's different
How many times we have to say the same thing? It's like falling on deaf ears.
If I could just jump in, I think that we had, I think we heard it. I think it was a question of synchronizing the summer work with an understanding of and I hear what you're saying, and again, I don't want you to be frustrated too much in terms of falling on deaf ears because we hear what you're saying. We were looking at trying to exercise a master plan, I believe, through our facilities committee, looking at the sort of the larger scope and trying to figure out what summer work might look like within the context of a larger project. So what I think was helpful for us, and where I think we're going to pick up speed, is the last time we met as a full board. I thought it was a very effective. The full board coming up with an ability to determine what the scope is appropriate based on the, the priorities, and also looking at selecting work that is essential. It's sensitive to our budgetary considerations. And I think I certainly felt more comfortable knowing that we could sit down with a spreadsheet and develop, the next 2 summers worth of work. So I think the next time we meet, I spoke to Mr. Jacobs after our meeting. I did feel very encouraged, even though we've lost some time. I feel good about the future in terms of our ability as a full board to develop that scope, and have a better direction, within the, considering the full board. I have a much clearer picture of what I believe the board, the wishes of the board are. We may have been talking past. I think there was a communication issue. Certainly and I'll take the blame for this. I wasn't maybe hearing. I wasn't really hearing what I felt was, maybe the will of the board. I think we were, not to rehash old business, but I know we were looking at a large HVAC. We were looking at a very large scope. And I just think we were tackling this. We were tackling it from the perspective of we should have been looking smaller rather than larger. And I do think that we've got better processes in place to make sure that we're able to kind of put this work together more quickly going forward. So I'll take the blame for that. I know that we probably, the time got away from us last fall. We were answering questions, and we were trying to get a better understanding of what the long view was. But rather than looking at it, to 15, 20 years in a large project, we scaled it down a little bit. And I think, and I'm hoping that while we may have lost a little bit of time going into the summer, it wasn't because we didn't hear you. It was mostly because I think we were just we were just talking past each other. But I think we're in sync right now with what we think the board, the wishes of the board are, and hopefully the next time we meet. And again, Lonnie, if I'm off base here, I think the next time we meet as a full board, maybe we kind of revisit what we did the last time we met, when we were putting scope, when we were kind of determining what that scope might look like, and then we can now we can start to project that, a summer or 2 out now, and not really feel like we're obligated to, a much larger project, which I think managing is far different than the approach we're taking now. So I'm comfortable with the approach. Again, I apologize if I wasn't, if I wasn't, hearing the board, but I think we hear each other now. I think we've got a structure in place to make this work go more smoothly. Certainly the decision process is much more smooth now. So hopefully we won't lose any more time.
Well, let me ask a question. We got a long agenda in front of us, and we spent a lot of time on this so far. I mean, I've heard, earlier that Lauren indicated that, they haven't started work yet, that they're looking for direction and approval to start work. So when we had spoken back in the end of December, about 2.5 weeks ago, that, we basically, had the scope established, and my impression was that the work was going to start. The work hasn't started, so we've lost another couple of weeks between when we last, the board was together and agreed upon the scope, and where we are today. Looking at the agenda tonight, I don't see a resolution or anything to start Clark Patterson Lee on this work. So, without a doubt, I think you've sensed the board's frustration in terms of where we are today. And we could follow up the frustration and have the discussion as to how we got here and what we're going to do about it. But at the same time, we need to be able to figure out how we're going to get Clark Patterson Lee moving forward so that we don't lose any more time. So my question is that, A, what do we need to do to get Clark Patterson Lee going? Because I think the board is in consensus that we want to get the work going because we want to get something done this summer. And then we can, follow up the discussion as to how we got to where we are at a later date. Maybe in a smaller group, but right now we need to get Clark Patterson Lee moving, and we need to get going with the balance of the agenda.
Well, Lonnie, if I can ask one more question before we get moving too fast. If I was understanding Lou's points on especially the electrical work, while it's a favorable bidding market, it sounded like there was going to be inefficiencies in how that was going to be done, whether it was second shift or stretching out their projects and managing it quite complicated. Is it incrementally going to cost us money doing it in this approach? And are we better off trying to pause that part of the project work and time it differently, right? We want to get work done during finite periods of time, but we shouldn't be paying premiums to get work done.
But Dan, my response would be, is the first thing we need drawings to understand what the work is. We can't make the determination of potential inefficiencies because, I had said, we don't want the subcontractor going in and opening up ceilings at night and closing them at night because that's just doing repetitive work. So
Exactly.
I think I agree with you 100%, but I think step one is get the drawings going so we understand what the work is. And then to your point, 100%, I'm not saying to do the work, next fall in a piecemeal fashion just to get the work done. If we have the drawings approved and it does not make sense to do it next fall, then we see what work we can do maybe during next spring break or next
That's fine.
winter break. But we need to understand what the work is and then figure out how it fits into our schedule. But
And
until
Lonnie, to your point, I think what's important is on every phase of work that we've went out to bid with, I estimated it before we went out to bid to make sure I felt good that we were going to hit the numbers. I want to do that here as well. I want to be able to say, I got a scope of work. I want to estimate it. And I want to make sure that we're going to hit the numbers and feel like, as we did in the past, make a recommendation to you and say, you got good value. And I really do believe, and again, I'm going to go back, right now is a good time to bid. There may be some inefficiencies, but that being said, I do believe that there's contractors looking to fill their books for 2021. So we should try to at least here at the end of the day, at the minimum, we take in bids. You don't like the bids, you don't have to take the number. You don't have to take the number. So it's,
I heard you that you need something to be able to figure out what the phasing and what the sequencing could be. And
yes,
there are various sequencing options. One may be to do it in a very efficient fashion, and I'll say the summer of 2022, and it's going to cost us X, or we can do it, starting this summer and running into the fall, and it's going to cost us Y. But then we, as a board, know what the incremental cost is to accelerate the work and do it now in an inefficient fashion. But until you get drawings, you can't help us make the decision. And we can spend tonight and discuss this all we want. And all we're doing is postponing getting drawings in your hands to be able to figure out how it's best to do it. And quite honestly, the drawings are the drawings. If we don't even put it out for bid and we put it out for bid 2 years from now, we still have the drawings done.
you still have the drawings. Exactly.
We got to get the
And,
drawings.
you want to get them to SED, you get them approved. I agree. Do the work. Yeah. Yep.
I wanted to make sure we were clear though, right? Because there's several issues we're discussing. We have a capital planning issue that we have to talk about. Tom's raising points. We have to get our arms around how we're better planning for work. What I want to make sure we're clear though, because of our planning challenges, that we're not paying premiums. Okay.
Well, we know what we're paying, and it's justified. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your question,
Back
your question
to my
is still on the table.
at the beginning. What do we need to do to get Clark Patterson Lee moving?
Honestly, Mr. Jacobs, we just need the board's informal green light, verbal okay tonight so that they can get started. And then we will bring forth, because we had planned for the January 21st workshop. We could bring a formal resolution to that meeting because we had dedicated an update on summer work for that workshop on the 21st. So we can do that. So really at this time, we just need an informal okay to go ahead and get them started.
So so if we give you an informal green light, if I poll the board members and I get a nod that everybody's in favor of green lighting Clark Patterson Lee, we're talking about 4 weeks from tonight, and Lauren, bear with me, that they'll have their drawings up to SED.
Yeah, the 21st or shortly thereafter by the schedule. I think Lauren said no later than the first week in February.
We originally were talking about the 5th, and that was with the assumption of starting on this Monday, so the 4th. But I still think we can make it by the 5th, starting tomorrow.
Mhm.
Okay.
Bonnie, I'm sorry, just to clarify, we can engage architect work without a resolution?
They'd be basically working at risk on the assumption that we're going to give them the resolution on the 27th.
And we're willing to do that.
I appreciate that, Lauren. So
Of course.
do I have, a head nod, from the board members that we want a green light? Okay. All right. So does that, Dr. Pritchett, does that provide you what you need?
That's it.
And then we can have the formal resolution and a much, greater detailed discussion at the board workshop.
And Mr. Jacobs, we'll send the board, once we meet with Lauren and Lou Moore, we'll send information in terms of the resolution and their backup materials prior to the 21st. So the board has a good opportunity to review it before that workshop on the 21st.
And just, in terms of the financial aspects of it, it's basically in the terms of the agreements that has already been established with Clark Patterson Lee. So
Correct.
Yeah,
we
that's
know,
right.
we know what we're committing to, basically. There's no surprises there.
Correct.
Okay.
And out of respect, I just want to let the board know, I didn't mention this tonight without speaking to Lauren and Lou first. So I didn't shock them tonight by knowing that we were looking for the informal okay tonight, but we'll get everything to the board well in advance of the meeting on the 21st.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. So if there are no other questions, I'd like to, and thank you, Lou and Lauren, for joining us tonight. We appreciate the work that you're doing for us, and we're looking forward to picking up some steam here. So thank you.
Thank you.
What I'd like to do is introduce Jeannie Corcoran. Jeannie, are you with us? Jeannie and Brian, there you are. Jeannie and Brian Coulott. I've asked Brian to join in because there could be, depending upon the depth of questions that the board has with regard to our mid-year data presentation. You should all have a copy of this. You should have a hard copy. I know we've also provided you, in addition to the data presentation, and again, it's going to follow a similar format to the one we gave you last year at this time. But we've also included, because again, it's a different type of year, we've got the hybrid learning survey results, which I know that Dr. Coulott did a very nice job with. It's, I know we certainly hear a lot of anecdotal information from staff and from parents and kids. And this is a great way, I think, to kind of put it in a format that looks a little bit more from a qualitative analysis standpoint. And then we also have some backup documentation for some of our, while we haven't really been administering standardized testing because we're in COVID, which may not be a bad thing in that sense, to that regard, in terms of accountability. But we also have some student results as well in terms of Renaissance learning and some of the formative assessments that we've been giving ongoing for your review as well. But without further delay, I'd like to introduce Jeannie to give her presentation, our presentation as it relates to our mid-year data analysis.
Thank you, Dr. Pritchard. I appreciate that very much. And Let me just make sure that I have my screen shared correctly. Is that working? Yes, everybody sees? Can I get a thumbs up? There we go.
You're good. We see your screen.
Okay, so thank you. And, good evening to everybody on the board. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to you a little bit about our district data and give a little bit of an update of where we are. And I'm calling this Beyond ESSA. Why am I calling it Beyond ESSA? Because due to the COVID-19 implications, NYSED suspended state assessments for the spring of 2020, January 2021. They also suspended reviews of district performance for the 2019-20 school year. In addition, the accountability statuses for 2019-20 were rolled over and have continued for the 2020-21 school year for all school districts in New York State. So even though New York State has done all of this kind of become stagnant a little bit, we still need to use our own metrics and data to see where we are as a district and to determine what are our students' needs. When we look at the ESSA measures, we've become more and more familiar with the 7 ESSA measurements. These first 4 ESSA measures, though, are strictly based on state assessment results. So these 4 measures are not valid if we're not taking any kind of state assessments. So we'll start by first looking at chronic absenteeism. And chronic absenteeism, as you can recall, is defined as students who are absent 10% or more of the days that they have been enrolled. So in 2018-19, 233 students, or 7.7% of our district, were absent, fell into this category. In 2019-20, that's last year, it was 262 students, or 8.9%. However, this was based only off of September 2019 through March 2020, because then we went to remote and the state did not collect attendance data for chronic absenteeism from the remote learning in the spring. Year to date this year, from 2020-21, we have 175 students that are currently absent 10% or more of the days enrolled, or 6.1%. So one of the things, though, that I looked at that I wanted to point out is there were 81 students on the list for both years, from 2018-19 to 2019-20. That means that those other students were helped somehow the following year. That's, it was 152 students left the list, so to speak. Or another way of looking at it is last year, we had 181 new students that were on the list, and 81 were carryovers. So there were different issues, not necessarily the same issues. Of those 81 students, so I want to start to look at that continuity of, do we see that these students are having the same problems, the same issues with absenteeism? Of those 81 students, 25 of those students have now this year turned it around, and they've been absent 3 days or less for 2020-21. And then the other piece is to keep in mind that of those 81 students, 18 have transferred out this year and 4 have graduated. So they're no longer going to be part of our chronic absenteeism this year because they've transferred out or they've been able to graduate. When we look at graduation rates, we look at the 4-year cohort, the 5-year cohort, and 6-year cohort, because not everybody graduates in 4 years. Some students do need a little bit more time. The ideal is 4 years, but sometimes, more time is needed. So we can see that as of for our 2019-20 days data, 97% of our students that graduated from our 4-year cohort, 98% graduated in the 5-year cohort, and 97% graduated in the 6-year cohort. What I think is kind of even more interesting, that's the ESSA data that they look at. But what I think is more interesting to look at is after those 6 years, what's our number of non-graduates at that point? To me, that's 5 students, that's 8 students. Those are, 9 people. And looking at those people to see what happened, where did they go, and what are the signs of this that we can identify earlier so that we can get the support that they might be needing sooner. The last of these metrics is the college and career and civic readiness. This is based off of the CCR measure is based off of the type of Regents diplomas that students are issued. They get different weights based on whether it's an advanced Regents diploma, a participation in AP classes, a Regents diploma or a local diploma only, or a CDOS credential, or none of the above. This past June, we had 277 completers. 98 of those completers had Regents diplomas. 177 had advanced Regents diplomas, and 2 had commencement credentials. That would be our COVE students that, what they get is a commencement credential. Of those 277 completers, we had 4 seals of biliteracy. Getting an advanced Regents diploma is not the only way to get the 2.0 weighting. It can be from getting a seal of biliteracy, any of these things that are on here. Certain grades on AP exams, etc. And even participation in AP classes gets a 1.5. In addition to being part of a dual enrollment class can be another way of getting it. So looking at our AP enrollment, because that was another, way of, for this metric, I just wanted to kind of point out I went too far. Sorry about that. So I just wanted to point out that this is some of the changes that have taken place this year in terms of our 2020-2021 enrollment in our AP classes. It is down a little bit, but not significantly. Any of this data, we need to be looking at the why that's behind the data. Why is this happening? And, quite frankly, a lot of this for 2020 and 21, we're in a pandemic. So, that changes a lot of things. When we're doing, it changes a lot of things, and I'll leave it at that. The next measure is our English language proficiency. And while we didn't have the state assessments in order to look at our ELP, in addition to the efforts that we make in order to help our students with English as a new language, an increased effort has been made to reach out to the families of those students to make sure that they're kept informed and to ensure access for all. At the start of the pandemic, we had quite a number of families who did not have email addresses listed with the schools. So we were moving to this digital platform, and we had a large number of families that didn't have any access to, not to the technology themselves, but to conversations about what was going on and those kind of things. So part of that process was that many of these families were our ENL students, and part of that process was that there needed to be outreach to all of these families, and tech support needed to be provided, and we've done that, and we now have almost none. We do have 1 or 2, but it's definitely a lot less. And I just need to give a shout out to Jessica Inglis, who had parents come in and sit with her so that she could help them get an email address for them to sign up for, and then help them to sign up for PowerSchool Power Portal, and then taught them how to use it. It's really, going above and beyond. That kind of tech support was fantastic and has been a lot of help for parents. So now we've got to figure out, if we don't have the state assessments, what do we do as an alternative? So as educators, without the state assessment being there, we need to begin to do a deeper dive into exploring the questions of what are we assessing, why are we assessing it, and how are we assessing it? Our first priority, especially during this pandemic, needs to be that we need to assess social emotional needs and growth first, then assess academic needs and progress. Our ways of doing this, alternatives to state assessment, the primary way is actually the one that's listed last, and that's the teacher-created assessments. Though that's our primary way of determining what our students' needs are. But in addition to that, we have Fontes and Pinnell and running records that are being kept for reading for grades 2 through 5. And then we use the STAR early literacy grades K and 1 for both the fall and the spring. We use STAR reading for grades 2 through 8, fall, winter, and spring, and STAR math for grades 2 through 8, fall, winter, and spring. In addition to these uses for the STAR assessments, our high school uses the STAR reading in their English classes. But when we started utilizing the STAR reading, when it first came around, we were really using it to satisfy the state's requirements for SLOs. So what we've had to do is change how we're using the STAR assessments. Teachers have been engaged in professional development opportunities to use this data to inform their instruction. STAR reports can be utilized to give specific suggestions as to the needs of the students. And I'm going to see if I can share the specific report, because I think that's kind of an interesting report to look at. So this is some of the information that teachers can get. Yes, we can get, where they fall according to the district benchmark, where the student falls. It also gives a projection of where the student should fall in the spring. And the part of it that I think is very helpful is that it goes for each specific student what specific focus skills they might be needing to work on. This gives a little bit more of an opportunity for teachers to see some specific suggestions. Now, mind you, our teachers are still professionals in this, in terms of this gives a guidance. This is not something that says, oh, this means that all these students need to be doing this. It's a suggested focus skill and areas that need to be covered. So this is it's one of the many tools that our teachers can use. And I'm gonna switch back to the presentation again. So we've engaged in a lot of additional professional development opportunities to use the data that's available to inform instruction. And we've done a lot of more training about where this data is and how these reports can be utilized. So let's look at some of the district-wide data. We did administer the STAR assessments for the fall of 2020, and it's quite interesting to administer these assessments when we're in a hybrid learning model, because that means that not all of the students are taking them in the same room at the same time. So it was quite the challenge, but it was able to be done. And from that, we get to see, there's been a lot of talk about, our children are falling behind, or there's a pandemic slide in addition to the summer slide. Well, we need to see, where are they? Do we in fact have a pandemic slide or a summer slide that's gotten even worse? So this is where we're at right now for the fall. And from this, we can see that about 20% of our students are in need of some form of intervention. Again, that's based off of the district, district qualifications, the district set benchmarks, and meeting them and needing intervention based off of that. This becomes our list of students to see, does the teacher think that the student needs RTI services, etc. This is where we went for STAR reading results. And again, we can see that approximately 26% thereabouts are identified as possibly needing intervention in reading. The reality is All of our students need intervention in reading right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic. This has been, quite a difficult time for all of our students. So, students in general, humans in general, need help in all of these kind of things. And here's our STAR math results. But this just kind of gives us a baseline again of where we're at and where do we need to go, and identifying what some of the needs are. I also included some reports that I thought were kind of interesting, looking at, okay, how does this year compare to previous years? So in terms of our early literacy, the STAR early literacy, we can see that where we are this year, and each of these other lines gives us where we were that fall compared to where we were the following spring, the same students being assessed. So for the early literacy, again, which is our kindergarten and first, it's not that bad. We're not in too bad of shape. That it's just information though. It's not anything to make decisions, too much decisions. It's one piece of data. When we look at the STAR reading, yes, it does definitely, it is a bit lower than it's been, but two things that I would caution on this. One is we fully expect that this is going to show an increase for the spring. That's our hope, and that's our desire with what our interventions are on this. But we can see, again, the positive increase. And the last thing that I just want to say before I, even in terms of the math, remember that when we started using the STAR assessments, two things. One is not everybody was taking, we had different things that were going on with how these assessments were being used. But, we do see something that's a little bit more concerning in terms of the STAR math proficiency. And, we've got to do things about it. And it is being done. I don't know why my thing changed. Sorry. When I switch to this. So during the month of November, we administered a survey to parents, teachers, and students from grades 6 through 12 regarding the hybrid learning. The results of this survey have been shared with administrators and are being shared currently with staff and will be shared with parents and students as well. Again, I'm going to jump over to that screen share so that we can kind of take a little bit of an overall peek at those. Not going to go into it too detailed because you have them there, but you can see that what the student results were, and it's got lots of nice graphs for it of what students are agreeing about and strongly agree and their relationship with it. The part that I'm actually going to jump down to is the comments. That's actually, I feel like that's where we get the most information, is looking at the comments and reading the comments. And the fact of the matter is that we had 29 positive comments that came in from the, I have to look back at it again, how many students? We had 598 students that participated. 29 of the comments were positive comments. And a lot of times students don't make comments at all. So, that was nice. And then these were the negative comments that came up again and again. And by negative comments, they're not necessarily negative comments. They're things that we already knew. Too much time on Zoom or too much time on the computer each day, that's difficult for students. So we already knew these things, but this just gave us the data to be able to, the hard data to look at it and to make some changes. We also have some teacher results. From K through 12, we had 170 teachers that participated in that survey. And the teacher survey was worded a little bit differently in terms of they responded with the agreeing and their metric that way, but it followed up with comments, a comment opportunity. So again, I pulled out what the common comments were, and they're included on the bottom of each of these. So you can read through them. And, I think the common thread throughout it is that this stuff is difficult. It's difficult. It's difficult for students. It's difficult for teachers. It's difficult for parents. That came again and again. Doesn't mean that it's impossible, and it doesn't mean that it can't be done, but it's definitely very difficult. And again, we all know that. Again, here were some of the parent results then. And, you know, we had 936 parents that participated in the survey, and that was fantastic. That's a really, you know, nice number to have participated. Most of the agreements were, you know, strongly agree or agree. These were definitely better than our survey last spring. So that was kind of nice to know that we have improved a lot of it. And then in terms of the common themes of comments for parents, 133 comments were positive or were thank you. And that was fantastic to read. And again, you know, most of the comments that were negative or concerning were things that we know: too much screen time, eye strain, headaches, too much homework and not enough homework. Those are things that happen again and again. You know, too much for one, not enough for another. So I'm gonna go back to this. And so we will be, as I said, we will be doing the survey to parents. We're going to be going over the results of the survey with parents and with students. And yeah, that's it. So, oh, sorry. I don't know how I missed. I had a looking ahead. It got out of order. So I'm just going to go back. Oh, look at that. It does the origami backwards. Okay. So looking ahead, we're using our data teams to look at what this data is telling us and to see how can this inform where we can do our improvements. We're also looking at exactly what we were talking about before of how are we using assessments and what are the assessments that teachers are using and how can we gain the data from that assessment so that there can be consistency and use that to inform our practice. We have additional PD opportunities both for all of this, and additional parent workshops and tech training for parents are going on as well. And that's it. So at this point, I will turn it back over for questions.
So, Mr. Jacobs, I'll go ahead and let you facilitate the board's question and answers, if you please.
So does any of the board members have any questions? I don't see anybody raising the, oh, okay.
I do, yeah. I just thank you so much. I think this is really great. I really appreciated your presentation. It's really great. It's a lot of hard work, and my question is just about what do you anticipate that the data teams, how will they be able to use the data then? You know, boots on the ground. How is that going to work?
So one of the data teams, it's actually the South Orangetown Middle School. We're meeting next week. I forget which day. And so the focus of that is going to be to start looking at this data, to make sure that teachers are trained in how to use, to get the STAR data, and then to start having discussions about what does this data mean? What are the commonalities? What do we see that students are struggling with across the board? And then, is this something that has to do with the pandemic? What implications does this have in terms of our curriculum? What implications does this have in terms of our practice? Because it's got to be a balance of all of that all at the same time. So that's one of the ways. William O'Shafer is actually doing training this Monday at a faculty meeting, and they're also starting to look at the data that's there. We have our RTI teams have started to use this data to start making decisions. And again, it's it's not, I don't want us to be like, oh, it's all about the star, because it's not. This is one piece of the data that they're looking at. This is one piece of the picture for the students. That's, so
Has the star, with all the in and out of the students, has the star been given to all the students?
yes, it has.
At the younger grade? Yeah.
Yes, we actually have the ability for, we were able to set up STAR to be able to be administered remotely. So students that can take it from home. And now the concern about that was, how do we know that mom and dad aren't sitting over them, helping them out when it doesn't really help them? So, removing the stick of the assessment of, hey, this is not a punitive assessment at all, is part of the conversation in that, so that parents get comfortable with, we don't need to get 100 on it. But the other piece is, as of January, when we're administering the winter and the spring, we will also be asking, the first question will be, where are you taking this assessment? Are you taking it at home or in school? So that can be part of the teacher looking at, did that have something to do with it? We also look at, how long did it take the kid to take the test? So if it took the student 5 minutes to take the assessment, clearly they were just kind of going through. Probably, maybe they were stuck and gave up, but probably they just kind of blew through it. So it's all of that has to be taken into consideration with it.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
If I could just add one thing, is that kids are taking these assessments multiple times a year, and so we have data to look back. If there's a child that didn't score well, we can look back at previous scores, and we'll have future assessments hopefully in person soon. And as Jeannie stressed, it is just one piece of data that the data teams are looking at. The other piece is just, when we're looking at this data with teachers, we're looking at individual students, we're looking also across a classroom, we're looking also across a grade, and then we're looking across the school, and trying to identify any particular concepts or skills where an entire grade can perhaps, use additional instruction in that. And so we've been doing that for quite a while, and Jeannie's been working with those data teams even pre-pandemic. So I feel like we're in a pretty good place with that.
Go ahead, Ms. Lee, you had some questions?
Yeah, I did. I also want to commend you, Ms. Corcoran. This is really, really terrific. And I could tell there's a lot of work that went into it. So, I love data. So I have a few questions, if I may. You did mention in the chronic absenteeism that, of course, we stopped collecting the data in March of 2020 when we went to the pandemic. Did we collect any of the data after that for that school year?
So it's not that we stopped collecting the data, it's that the state.
Oh, you didn't report it.
Right, it's not reported. So that's why I was basing it just on what the state reporting it was. And, for the springtime when we were in pandemic, it became, how are we assessing that they're absent, and there was just so much in when this pandemic hit of trying to give grace to students that were struggling and trying to get technology up and running at students' homes and things like that. So, it doesn't feel fair to, ding them for being chronically absent,
Right.
So,
Okay.
but we took attendance on a daily basis, and that was used to make sure that if students weren't checking in and weren't participating, okay, what can we do to reach out to them? The counselors and social workers were mobilized to make sure that we were getting every student online and participating while we were out in the spring.
Okay, yeah, that really is my next question. So yeah, thank you for that. You also mentioned that I think you started the chronic absenteeism data started in 2017, and you were showing some improvement, particularly with individuals that you were, in fact, I recall you were saying that the chronic absenteeism the following year was actually different students. Mm-hmm. So do we have the learnings on what was done to improve their absenteeism? And is that something that we can, that is being implemented to help students improve on absenteeism?
So, each student is a unique situation. They're not all, they can't all be treated the same. But last year, there were a lot of things that were implemented in the schools in terms of the chronic absenteeism teams, Brian, please help me out, jump in. The social worker and the prevention counselors.
Social worker, prevention counselors, yeah. There's definitely been, I think, because of some of the resources that the Board of Education has supported over the past few years and we put into place, and some of the plans that were put into place through Dr. Tessick's office, we definitely have a much better handle on absenteeism. The teachers also starting as being the first people to start with the outreach. And there's really a team approach now in each school. And I definitely think that has to do with the change.
Oh, okay.
But
So
I think now it's going to be very interesting moving forward with in-person learning. And I think we're going to have a lot of, momentum to build back up to where we were.
Okay, no, but so I think what I hear, and I think what the good positive thing is that you have a playbook now. You have plans on the resources to go out there, and what it is that you need to do in order to improve their absenteeism. I get it. Every student is different. Every circumstance is different. Is there anything though that you may be finding that can be done from a preventative standpoint, particularly as you're talking about the different students are seeing, you're getting kids improve and then some new kids. So is any of that a learnings that's being popped up?
Yeah, so some of it has been doing outreach to parents, especially in the lower grades, about the importance of being there. We found quite a few parents had the belief that, oh, it's only first grade, what difference does it make? So there was kind of changing that that culture and that mindset that, yeah, being here is important. It's the older grades that the kids are voting with their feet of if they don't, there's a lot more of deeper reasons why they're not there. So that's been enabled as well, is having that kind of outreach of why. And the last thing that I just want to point out is that one of the things that Rudy Arrieta has pointed out to me is that with this hybrid learning, we've started to reach students that we couldn't reach before, so that they're no longer chronically absent. Students that had issues of school phobia or things like that are now more comfortable in the hybrid learning, model that we're doing. So, it has issues and it has positives as well, and it's still the point that I just wanted to make though is that this year is still going to be very different, just like last year was very different because the circumstances, the world is very different. We're not in normal at all.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that was interesting about the survey results from the kids is the majority of kids and teachers feel that they do better in person. But there are a percentage of kids that now feel that they do better remotely or they prefer to be remotely. And that we have to get at the root of what is preventing them from engaging when they are in person. Is it social? Are there, the things that Jeannie was talking about? So looking at that, and it's great that most kids feel better in person, but we want all kids to feel, better supported when they're in person, and some of them in the open-ended comments even talked about that. So we're certainly able to address that now, I think a little bit differently.
That's interesting. I mean, there is an upside then for doing the remote learning. You're getting learnings from, different types of learning, and perhaps that might be put into a new model in the future. So with that, as my last question, I did see in the survey that those, obviously those students who are independent learners are the ones who are doing, quite well in this remote learning environment. So I know that, we always strive to have students be independent and be independent learners. And is there though something that we are also taking a look at to help initiate more independence in their learning?
Well, I think that this model is forcing many students to become more, to move them each further along in their own process towards being independent learners. I think that what you saw in the survey was that those students who are already far along in the process of being independent learners are thriving in it, you know, and are there. But we always try to push students to be more independent, you know, and it's just a process. And, you know, students' growth and development, it cycles. It takes time, you know.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see when we go back to 100% in person. Yeah. All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Henry, Mr. Lamadrid, you good?
Ms. Corcoran, I'm good. Thank you very much.
So just a quick question. Again, echo everybody's comments and terrific presentation. I did, you know, recognize you're absolutely right. And clearly, pandemic year, the results are going to look and skew differently than we may have expected. The AP enrollment, though, did catch my eye, right? Especially, I mean that's the 10% decline in AP. Clearly, we've used that as an indicator, right? We talk about college readiness, and we've been pushing and for years, you know, really leaning on that, make sure that we're expanding the enrollment. So just two questions. First of all, one, is it the numbers presented, is that adjusted for duplicates, right? Where one student is taking multiple AP courses?
That is number of, oh, that's a very good question. AP enrollment by grade. It is the number of, I don't remember. I collected this data too long ago and I don't remember, but there is a difference and yeah, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I can get back to you on that one.
Appreciate that, but the bigger question then is
typically it's the number of enrollments. So if a kid is taking 3, you're seeing that there.
Yep.
It's not.
It's the number of kids, it's the number of placements.
Yes, number of placements.
So you know, with data, right? You never want to overreact to one data point. But again, you know, I look at this as a indicator, maybe not a leading indicator, but possibly a leading indicator, right? Especially as we are absolutely focused on college and career readiness. So I would just ask, you know, maybe for a follow-up, just to pursue this statistic a little bit further. You know, bring whatever group together you think is, you know, is there something here? Right. I don't want to just say, oh, pandemic year, it should be down and we shouldn't stress about it. I'd want to see if we could pursue it a little bit further and say, is there something here that we need to be focused on?
We definitely do need to pursue it further, but I did have a conversation with someone who said that their child had chosen to not take the APs class because of what took place with the AP exams last year. So they didn't want to be in the unknown. So they were signed up for AP classes and chose not to once the pandemic hit. And, you know, it's, yeah, but this is going to be followed up on with the high school.
Yeah,
you know, more.
I would just be careful with, you know, one outlier or whatever. I'm sure it was a factor, but we wouldn't want to make that's the reason why, right? I think we should again, likely is the case. I would just hate for this to be a real symptomatic of something bigger, right? And I would just ask that we pursue it in that regard.
Absolutely.
Dan, we'll look to describe that phenomenon, and as well as Christine had suggested some of the macros as it relates to, you know, for example, independent learners. You know, those another macro I don't think we really hit as hard tonight as we should have probably. This is not obviously not a criticism of Jeannie. You know, we did what we needed to do tonight, mid-year. But the other phenomenon I think that's real relevant is our focus area D, as it relates to not necessarily ESSA metrics, which we wanted. That's where Jeannie was at today as a starting point. But beyond those ESSA metrics, things like substance use, depression, mental health, things that really are striking at the heart of our learners this year because of the pandemic. And I know those are things that maybe aren't measured under ESSA, maybe indirectly as a second order effect as it relates to things like climate and absenteeism. But I know that Dr. Tesic really has been looking at this beyond anecdotally, but in terms of frequency of students who require, supports because of this, and how our students maybe are being affected because of the times that we're in, and and how are those resources that we've applied, because we have put a lot of resources into making sure that our students are feeling feeling more included, are feeling less isolated, and we want to make sure that those things are working. So we'll have more to say about that, in addition to some of those other macros that I think you suggested tonight, going forward, particularly as we approach end of year. I think our data presentation will be looking at some different categories as well, or a greater in depth. Tonight was really just sort of an introduction, sort of a mid-year check-in. We don't want to wait till the end of the year to say, this is what the data looked like. This was really an opportunity for you to sort of, get introduced, refamiliarize you folks with our different categories, as well as look at any patterns that might be developing that may require the board's awareness, mid-year. So with that, I'll conclude my comments pending any other additional questions you might have relating to Jeannie. Jeannie, great job, thank you. And Brian, thank you.
Questions.
Great job, Jeannie.
Before you go, I've got a couple of questions.
Oh, sorry.
I appreciate Ms. Lee's questions on attendance. She asked a lot of your questions, or some of the questions that I was going to ask. And I appreciate the fact that, you said numerous times that, this is a different year, with what we've got going on. And, the simple approach could have just been to throw up our hands and say, well, we'll evaluate it, next year. But, I'm glad to see that we still drill down, under the situations we have now to see how we're doing, attendance wise. I sort of look at like the attendance when you look at from 2018, 19 to 19, 20, that, it's like your fingers in the dike, that, you plug some holes and you get, other leaks elsewhere, because, we're still talking about 150, 180 kids that, we solve the problems or resolve some of the concerns with, a significant group, but then we got another group to replace them. So it's right now it seems like it's a never ending, tail to keep chasing, to keep resolving the issue. And I understand we're doing that. But one of the things that, we didn't talk about is the 81 students that, were carried over from one year to the next year. And you did the analysis in terms of, the students that graduated or had less than 3 days, but we really didn't speak about the 35, 37 students that, were still on the list, and it's, a little over 1% of our student body and so forth. But what are we doing, for those students that, are on the list for, more than 1 year, that, are appearing on the list a second year, and potentially, could be challenged this year as well. So I'd like to just hear what we're doing in terms of trying to assist those students to
Sure.
reduce the absence.
So each of the schools has an attendance committee that is looking at, and that consists of the school psychologists, the counselors, the prevention counselors, as well as the administration from the school. And they're looking at each of the situations for those students. Those students have been flagged. They were flagged right from the beginning, and are looking at what kind of resources need to be taking place. Conversations and outreach has been made to parents to get supports and to find out what's the reasoning behind them, and what else is needed, in order to bring them in. I'm not on the attendance committees, so I can't speak to the specifics of what the interventions are that are being done. I can tell you that they are looking at the data and they are performing interventions. Yeah, but I can't speak.
And they are flagged, and they are, there's inroads trying to be made.
Absolutely.
Let me respond to that. So I think because of our Zoom format tonight, we typically would have Dr. Tessick in the audience, and that would have been her. This is something that she tracks very closely. As a matter of fact, that's why I jumped on my text message here to say, I'm sure Dr. Tessick is listening at home, and she's listening on Zoom. I'm sorry, on YouTube. But I know for a fact that she and her team track each of these students by name. This is not something that we batch students. Like every one of these students has a particular intervention that's prescriptive to that particular student. And I know that she does a decent job, an excellent job, she and her team. I think that, again, it's really, I apologize. This would have probably been a much, person probably could have answered this.
Fine. My question was answered. I just want to make sure that we're not, leaving these students out of the focus. That that there is an effort being made to remove them from the absenteeism list and get them back into the classroom. So that was my question. That was my concern.
Yeah, Lonnie, let me just suggest this then, because it's something I think that we need to hit home. I would almost like to pull that out for a separate discussion, for a separate presentation, as I alluded to earlier, because I think that's not I think I'd feel better if we did that sort of standalone.
That's fine.
Dr. Tessick, I would love to have her do that as a sort of a standalone presentation.
Right.
And we can look at that possibly next meeting, because I think that's one that I think we do, it requires a little bit more in-depth conversation.
Okay, that's fine. My next question is, when you talked about the alternatives to the state assessments, you talked about the STAR literacy and so forth, and the Fontes and Pinnell, but of course, a significant assessment is the teacher created assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And I just question, are we seeing challenges with that because of the hybrid situation where, I understand you've got some students in the classroom this week and others in the classroom next week. So, this teachers have the one-to-one relationship or, connection, I'll say, for most of their students, but you do have the students that are 100% remote. And, are we able to do we feel we're able to make a true assessment of the student that's 100% remote?
Dr. Coulette, I don't know if you want to handle that. Yeah.
Absolutely, sure. This was something that we started planning for last summer. We knew that we were going to need to assess students in a hybrid model, right? So we immediately started looking at what were the assessments that we had planned, how are we going to be administering them, were we going to be having kids come in the first week and take an assessment on a Friday and then having the second group come in on a Monday. And we have had a tremendous challenge, even with all that planning last summer coming into the fall, particularly at the secondary level and even more particularly at the high school level, because to assess a whole class of kids on the same content, you can imagine what kind of a challenge that has presented. Fast forward, our teachers have been working really hard within their departments and across departments and leveraging technology and some of the learning management system capabilities, for example, with Schoology, to be able to administer assessments in a way that prevent kids from having any kind of advantage from perhaps being home and taking those assessments, but it's certainly not perfect. And we're still working at it. So that's pretty much the best answer I could give you. But that is a topic of conversation daily.
It's a challenge, and we're trying to address it. It's a recognized challenge, and we're trying to address it. Okay.
Absolutely, and I think we have to some degree, and we're making a lot of progress.
Okay. So my last question, I don't know if I can ask it, but can I ask a question about the survey?
Sure.
So it's a simple question on the teacher results portion where it's the page that has, what grade you teach. When someone looks at this breakdown, they're going to see that there's a much higher participation percentage-wise by the secondary level versus the elementary level. And I believe that's just because of the makeup of our district, that we have considerably more secondary, level teachers than we do elementary level teachers. So I guess my question is from a district point of view, how was the staff participation with the survey?
It was good. The staff participation was pretty good, with 170 respondents. That's pretty decent. I will say that it also was that teachers could have put in multiple grades. So if I teach math at the high school and I teach 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, then I'm in there for 9, 10, and 11. So that's not necessarily something that I would hold too much stock in, as that there's repetitives in it. But the results, the overall, I think we had, I want to say that it was it was a very high percentage of our staff that did respond, of our teachers that did respond.
So I mean, one of the reasons why I asked the question, Dr. Pritchett, is, we're receiving a lot of comments about the elementary levels, with the elementary students, that they should be brought back to 100% of the time. And we've discussed our planning to try and do something like that. But my fear would be is the public may look at this and say that, well, only 8% of our first grade teachers participated in the survey, which is not what the graph is saying based upon the discussion we just had, right? But it could be misinterpreted, and it could foster the concerns of the elementary student parents that their students aren't being fairly represented. So I think we need to make clear that the percentages that are shown here don't necessarily represent the percentage of elementary students or elementary staff that participated in the survey. It's a percentage of the overall staff.
Yes,
And
I'll reword that. Got it. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Pritchett understands my concern as well, as to how it comes across right now. We want to make sure that it's the overall staff participation, not the per grade participation, and that we do have a concern for all our grades, throughout.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. It was a greatly appreciated presentation.
Thank you.
And as I mentioned, Mr. Jacobs, this is really our first cut at this. And it's also excellent to sort of do an inquiry as to what areas you'd like us to work on, or areas that you'd like further inquiry. So, if they're, knowing that we have a follow-up to this, we have an end of year, summative. If there's any areas that you as a board want us to dive deeper on, please let us know. And we'll be happy to, Jeannie and Brian, myself, the team, Dr. Tessick, in each of our focus areas, and I keep looking to the big board here because this is where everything is charted. Everything is sort of organized or coordinated. We are trying to systematize this, and we are trying to make this accessible to you as the Board of Education, because you're really looking at this.
I just want to be careful that, I don't want to systematize it to the point where, we're just taking the data and taking the data. I truly appreciate us taking the data and drilling down in different ways, based upon the data that we can get. And like anything, the more data you have, the more, questions you can ask and the more questions you can answer. So, You know,
So,
I don't want to make it an automated process. I always want to, make sure that there's a lot of thought that goes into what we're doing about it.
And I'll just say one more add on to that is that we don't want to do, I concur. We don't want to do data for data's sake. I think a lot of school districts fall into that trap. We collect data because we have questions we want answered. And that's really always where we start. What question are we trying to answer here? And that's really where you have to start. And I know that's where the team starts. So again, I bring it back to that. You need to be able to access as part of this organization. If there are questions you want answered, let us know, and we'll do it vis-a-vis the our data collection structure. So thank you for that. I think it was a pretty productive. So far, so good. I believe this concludes the superintendent's report. You guys, everyone, I appreciate everyone who presented tonight. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Again, we'll have more presentations, as it relates to data going forward. I know that we're going to start to get heavy into budget now. So data really is important. The performance data, the student data, those accountability data, those the gaps that we feel like maybe we need to redirect resources towards. I think this also leads into our budget discussion as well, in addition to the student accountability piece. So next, I want to say our next Board of Ed meeting, we will start to get into workshopping the next budget cycle. And it's going to be very important that we have a good handle on data, because I think it's, as Mrs. Coster alluded to earlier, it's going to be probably a rough budget cycle, maybe not as rough as it could have been given the revenue picture. A revenue picture is probably not going to be as disastrous as maybe we had anticipated, but it's still going to be rough, and it's still going to be tight, and we have to make sure we're putting our resources where they're most needed. So data does become significant to that end as well. So without any other questions, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Jacobs. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So the next thing on the agenda is committee reports. Does any board member have any committee reports? I know we had the holidays and we had a board meeting shortly before the holidays. So I don't know if there's any new committee reports.
Lonnie, we have a claims auditor interview process on Monday with Finance Council.
Yes, coming up, correct. Okay. So moving forward, if I may, the next item is the board discussions or changes on any of the agenda items. Does anybody have any? Okay. So the certificated personnel was revised. I believe all the board members have that. So can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items 6 through 9?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any new business?
I just wanted to mention again that on Monday, January 11th, we'll have the Rockland County School Board Association will have the legislative meeting. So if you did want to attend, it's going to be a webinar. The registration information, I know Kathy had forwarded that to everybody.
All right. Well, will you be attending, Leslie?
Yes, and presenting.
Oh, good. Any other questions or new business? So may I have a motion to adjourn at 10:01?
Motion.
Second.
Christine, that was you?
Yes. I'll always second the adjournment.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I appreciate everybody's time this evening. It was a lengthy meeting, but I think it was a good meeting.
So, a very good evening, and let's look forward to a healthy and happy new